The Treasury Department and SBA has been working around the clock. We will have a program up and running on Friday where not only the existing SBA lenders, but FDIC banks, credit unions, fintech lenders will be able to make loans. Those loans will cover 8 weeks of workers' salary plus additional money for overhead. If you let your workers go, you bring back your workers. For every worker you have, that portion of the loan is forgiven. So I encourage all small business, that's about half of the U.S. private payroll, go back and hire your workers because the government is paying you to do that.
This is an ambitious plan, and it's the kind of thinking that is needed right now. Mnuchin is smart. He is a kind of Goldman Sachs, Wall Street insidery guy, but he's a smart dude. And what he's saying here is, look, we are going to pay, we, the federal government, are going to cover your payroll. So make sure that you're paying people because it's free money for you to pay them. Keep your employees on the payroll. Maybe this works. Maybe this works. Who knows, really? Who knows what the long-term implications will be? You know, there are two ways that this goes badly, as far as I can see it. One, well, actually, no, there are three ways. One is that it's, and the most likely, I think, is that it's just insufficient. There's all kinds of problems with the actual dispersal of the funds. The funds are not enough for different businesses. That's all part of this. Okay, that's one problem. A second problem, we lead into, and this leads us into, I should say, a depression or a recession, one or the other. That's a very real consideration. And then we have to deal with that on top of everything else. And a virus that keeps coming back, even though we're in the midst of this, that's a possibility. And then there's another situation, and that is that we create too much stress, a systemic stress on our financial system so that this stimulus plan, this rescue package, becomes essentially what people have been warning about for decades, which is, you know, once we get upwards of $30 trillion of debt or whatever it is going to be when this is all over. I mean, it's $2 trillion right now added on, plus the $1 trillion deficit I think we're already going to run this year. So that's $3 trillion. We're going to be at $25 trillion in the blink of an eye. And if we do another package, it's going to be another $2 or $3 trillion probably on top of that. So we're looking at mid-20s trillion dollars of debt. What happens if then that leads to a collapse of the financial system, the dollar, hyperinflation? I mean, all these really scary scenarios. Those are the problems. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Anybody can really tell you this. I mean, one thing I'm quite certain of is that economists are bad at predictions, about as bad as most cable news anchors have been at being ahead of this situation and understanding what the implications of it really are. But the possibility of systemic financial collapse is just being pushed aside right now. We're just taking everything that can be done for the virus, to suppress the virus at the expense of maximum expense of the economy. This is the approach the administration's decided to take. And I mean, they have access to better information than I do. They have experts, which I am not. In fact, they have thousands of them. And this is what they're going to do. I'm concerned, but what are we really supposed to do under the circumstances? So what are we, the American people, going to do? I mean, they're telling us that if we just went back to life as normal across the country, this will kill hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, the number that Dr. Fauci said is that it could easily kill, or I should say the models clearly show upwards of 100 to 200,000 people dead from this if we went back to life as normal. Now, I've never advocated going back to life as normal right away. That is not a real position that anyone's had, but even standard, or I should say even escalating and de-escalating measures for containment that are on a dynamic basis changed to meet the circumstances of the moment, that's right now off the table too. It's just going to be everything you can do wherever this virus exists to shut this thing down, and we'll deal with the economic fallout later. That is real. I just want us all to be very clear that there was a discussion. You know, obviously the administration was thinking that by April 11th, by Easter, maybe we could start to lessen this up. So that was going to be balancing things toward protecting the economy a bit and taking a little bit more risk from the virus. That's what that means. People can say, "Oh, that's what it means." Okay, we're gonna talk like adults here. That's what that would be. I mean, the moment that you, and Fauci has said as much himself, the moment that you de-escalate, the moment that you drop down some of your protective measures, you're just more at risk from this. And that seemed like it was something that might happen in a matter of weeks. And now they're saying, no, April is lockdown month across the country. So, and the economy is something we'll deal with later. I really hope that they know what they're doing, because if, the same way that we didn't see this virus, no one really saw the virus coming. I've said to you before that pandemic is a big threat. And, then the question turns into, or before we're at this moment, well, was this the pandemic virus or not? We've had SARS, we've had MERS, we've had, H1N1, we've had these other similar incidents that were serious, but then felt a bit like not false alarms, but perhaps exaggerated states of alarm based on what the final reality of those viruses were. Are we going to look back at this moment? And this is the question that I posed to you, and I do not pretend to have an answer. Are we going to look back at this moment where we said everything against the virus, doesn't matter what the economy looks like right now or what it's going to do to it? And do you think there's a chance that we'll be saying at some point in the future, how could we have missed? It's so obvious. How could we have missed that this was going to lead us into depression? I'm not making that prediction. I don't know. But I do worry. I'm raising this as a question. I worry that that's what we're going to be thinking in 6 or 12 months. And it's not going to happen in a couple of weeks, but 6 or 12 months from now, we're going to say we went too far toward virus suppression measures and didn't keep in mind what the damage to the economy would be, what the damage would be to people's lives, the ability to fight the virus, all the things that Trump and the administration were talking about last week that seem to now have been not abandoned, but just put on hold until we can find something else, figure something else out. So, my friends, we'll have to see. We'll just have to see. I have Mnuchin telling you that this is going to work out great, which is really what he has to say. I mean, he's been very involved in coming up with it. Play clip 12.
I think this program is going to be enormously successful in stabilizing the U.S. economy, while hardworking Americans who lost their jobs or aren't able to work because of the medical situation, that they get help. So this money is going to go into the economy very quickly. It is going to help American workers very, very quickly. And I don't know how long it's going to take to kill this virus. I do know we will kill this virus. And when we do, I have great confidence that the U.S. economy will become roaring back.
This is what their assessment currently, this is where the assessment currently stands. We can put the economy on hold. We can just hit the pause button. Maximum measures to contain and suppress the virus. Hit the pause button on the economy. And then when we decide to press the start button again, we'll be all right. And actually we'll have a huge ramp up and things will be good. Man, that would be great. And it's a really comforting story at some level to hear now, especially for those of us who are sitting here saying, what happens if we head into a Great Depression? What does that do to this country? And, then you also get into the analysis that, and this is what people right now who view this through a partisan lens, I'm trying to view this through an America lens. I really am, every day. And I mean that, I know that can almost sound like some kind of cliche, but I really am thinking what's best for this country right now. Because there's also the chance that we look back at this. I'll be talking to you more about China today on the show, that we look at this moment in time and say, this is when China became the preeminent hegemon around the world. What does that mean if that happens? What would the Chinese Communist Party, with running a country of over 1 billion people with nuclear weapons and certainly some level of biological weapons program, I'm not saying this is a part of that, but what would it mean if all of a sudden that entity is the single most powerful government in the world? How many millions, how many billions of people will suffer, lose their life perhaps in wars? I mean, there's so much that goes into these calculations when you're talking about the future of the United States. That right now, I think that we are. I understand everyone's scared, and I'm in the middle of the scariest place. I mean, those of you that are listening to this show, I could walk out my doors and I'll tell you what it's like in New York a little bit. But there's nowhere in America right now that is more on edge about this virus than where I am sitting right now. I mean, this city is ground zero. But I'm saying that the voices of understandable concern, but even some that are really now edging on panic, they seem to have won out, and now we're doing a lockdown, and we're listening to experts whose job, understandably, is just to limit to the greatest possible degree any spread of this virus, and now we're being told essentially that there is no other balancing factor here, that we're doing absolutely everything we can, up to and including shutting down the economy for another 30 days. I really hope that they're right. I'm not in a position to say that they're wrong because I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, they don't know what's going to happen, but I don't have expertise in epidemiology and viral pandemics and all these other things. I do know that government incompetence is everywhere, and that the government, there's a part of me that is angry about, okay, the CDC the CDC has about a $7 billion a year budget, over 10,000 employees. What have they been doing all this time? This is the equivalent of the big invasion that everybody knew was coming by some foreign country, and it'd be like the Pentagon sitting around saying, try to arm yourself and see if you can help us fight this thing off. What? Really? The best the CDC can do is to put out a test that's faulty at the absolute critical moment, and then tell us basically to wash our hands, stay away from each other, shut down the economy, and don't go outside? I mean, that's really what they're telling us. That they don't really know how much this disease is spread through aerosolized droplets versus contact on surfaces, and people then just putting their fingers in their mouth or their eyes. They don't know. They don't know if you can get reinfected. There's some report out of China that says you might be able to get, some percentage of people might be able to be reinfected with this afterwards, which would be really distressing because usually virus, you have immunity at least for a long period of time after you get it. There's so much about this that they don't really know. And I do want to ask the question, what is exactly is the CDC, what have they been doing all this time? And the National Institutes of Health, what are they? Because I know that they've done things like they've had campaigns to tell people to have their kids eat more vegetables, and they want to study gun violence and things like that. I know that has happened. And it just feels like there wasn't really a playbook for this to be run by the CDC, by the NIH, and we've been making it up as we go along. And you do want to ask, what were they doing all this time? And really now we're turning, the likeliest scenario would be if the likeliest home run scenario for us and for humanity would be if one of these big pharmaceutical companies comes up with an excellent treatment for this. I keep seeing this anecdotal data about azithromycin and chloroquine, or hydroxychloroquine, not to be confused with the fish tank cleaner, chloroquine phosphate. That's a no-no. I see anecdotal stuff about this, but until we have some real clear studies on it for a few weeks, we're just not going to know. And we're going to continue to be in what feels like a bit of a guessing game on this. So my friends, the economy is just we're trying an experiment now with the economy that has never been done before. I don't know if this has ever been done before in human history. I just don't know if there's any analogous situation to this. And the people in charge are telling us, don't worry, we've got this. Okay, this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to try to go forward in good faith and listen to the experts on this. But I also know that a lot of things we've been told about systemic economic risk are only getting worse right now. I mean like catastrophe, like the economy just implodes, like dollars all of a sudden aren't worth anything. That's kind of what we think of as the worst possible scenario for the economy, which would just dissolve this country effectively. I'm going to hope that that's not going to happen at any point, and we're going to be okay. And I'm going to try to just downplay in my mind that the experts that we're always being told to listen to have been wrong on a lot of this stuff. And our leaders have certainly been wrong on a lot, and on both sides, by the way. This is not there's this sense that one party was right. That's a lie. That one media organization was right and others, no, that's not true. People have been getting this wrong left and right because nobody knows. That's really the operating or the operative phrase for what the future holds here. Nobody knows. And we're just doing the best that we can. And that's where coming together and rallying as people to each other's sides as much as we can day to day, that's what we can do. And hope that pray that these experts aren't making an enormous blunder by thinking that we can do this lockdown for another 30 days. I certainly hope that they're right and that we can just turn the economy back on. We'll see.
This is such a very, very sad time for us. So we should be taking every precaution. What the president, his denial at the beginning was deadly. His delaying of getting equipment to where it continues, his delay in getting equipment to where it's needed is deadly. And now I think the best thing would be to do is to prevent more loss of life rather than open things up so that, because we just don't know. We have to have testing. That's what we said from the start before we can evaluate what the nature of it is in some of these other regions as well. I don't know what the purpose of that is. I don't know what the scientists are saying to him. I don't know what the scientists said to him. When did the president know about this? And what did he know? What did he know and when did he know it? That's for an after-action review. But as the president fiddles, people are dying. And we just have to take every precaution.
Nancy Pelosi is neither a decent nor an ethical person. And you see this now in a way that has made clear what many of us have known for a long time. But Nancy Pelosi can't put aside her worst political impulses even for a moment. She can't do it. This is who she is. The president is fiddling and people are dying. How is the president fiddling? What is he supposed to do that he's not doing? He has invoked the Defense Production Act, and now he's actually used it, meaning that he has gone to major private companies and said, okay, you're now doing this. We're going to pay you for it, but you're now doing this thing. You're making this product. You're making ventilators or masks or whatever the case may be. And this is what he was being pushed toward. He didn't want to have to do it, but looked like General Motors was holding things up a little bit. So he said, okay, I'm the president. This is how it's going to be. Notice also how the people that were claiming the president, and there's so much that this is showing you about the lies, the dishonesty, and just the general deceit of the opposition to this administration for 3 years up until now. They kept saying that he's a dictator, he's an authoritarian, he's a fascist. I mean, these were things that were said about the president. And now that we're in a moment where it's a true crisis and the ability to seize and wield power now is greater than anything since 9/11. And in some ways is even more powerful than what we saw with the aftermath of 9/11. That ability is not being abused by this president at all. In fact, one of the criticisms against him that the left and others are using is that he's not seizing enough power in order to deal with this pandemic. Do you think anyone looks at that in that way now and reevaluates all of their Trump is a dictator, Trump is basically like Hitler? Do you think anyone does that? No, of course not. They choose not to do any of that because it was all for a purpose. It was all about a struggle for power. It was never about presenting you with the truth. So they lied about Trump until now. And we all should take a moment to recognize what it was. It was lies.
She's blaming the president of the United States for people dying because of the way he's led the country. That's the most shameful, disgusting statement by any politician in modern history. Let me tell you, we've seen the best of America from our citizens helping each other, delivering groceries, having special shopping hours for senior citizens. She's the first politician to blame another politician for people dying. This is the same Speaker of the House who held up the bill in the Senate for days because she wanted same-day voting.
It is disgusting, but it's really not surprising at all, isn't it? Nancy Pelosi now claiming the president's costing lives because of his response to this. Meanwhile, she delayed this rescue bill for the entire economy because of what? Because she wanted money for windmills and diversity on corporate boards. No one gives a crap about those things right now, Nancy Pelosi, who's not a total left-wing lunatic, but Nancy Pelosi is in fact a left-wing lunatic. So I suppose none of this should be considered even the least bit surprising. But the president also had I mentioned before, the back and forth with the press and how they think that still, even in this moment in time, They are so very important. Here was one of the exchanges that I didn't get to before. Play clip 10.
You were talking about governors of different states, and you said, I want them to be appreciative. You also said, if they don't treat you right, I don't call. These are direct quotes, sir.
Excuse me. Ready? Take a look at what it said. I want them to be appreciative of me, okay? And then you cut it off because it's fake news.
You and of your administration,
Listen,
absolutely.
Please, let me just finish. You just said it again, and you know the answer's a lie. You know that
I could read you your full comments, sir,
let me
if
just
that
say,
would
look,
be easier.
Your statement and your response and your answer is a lie. Because here's the story. You ready? I said, I want you to be appreciative of me, and then you go on, and then I go on, and you cut it off. But it says
you said,
because
I
when
want
you're
them
not,
to be appreciative. I don't want them to say things that aren't true. I want them to be appreciative. We've done a great job. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about Mike Pence, the task force. I'm talking about FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you.
But then you went on to say, if they don't treat you right, I don't call. He's a different type of person.
I don't call.
Referring to the
I don't
vice president.
call. No, I don't call the governor of Washington.
Why in this
now.
time?
But Mike Pence calls, and the head of FEMA calls. I don't stop them. Did I ever ask you to do anything negative, Mike, to Washington, the state of Washington? Michigan, I love that state. That's one of my favorite places in the whole world, Michigan.
This is a perfect example of the nonsense that you expect from the press. We all know how Donald Trump speaks. We all understand that he has a very particular way of saying things, a very Trumpian way. When he says that they're not nice to me, I don't call, all he's saying is that he has one of the other members of the task force speak to leaders. I mean, Jay Inslee has been an immature joke during some of this. I mean, after the president had a conference with him, I think it was 2 weeks ago, had a call with him, he went to Twitter and slammed the president unfairly on Twitter. So why isn't it a smart move? I mean, if you were managing a company and you had a very critical matter to deal with, which certainly addressing this is, if you had a critical matter to deal with and you were involved in a personal dispute with somebody in the company, why not take out that personal level and make it just about doing whatever is necessary to get the job done? So he's saying Mike Pence will be the one who makes the phone call, not me. That doesn't strike me as in any way a cause for alarm. I mean, he's the vice president. He'll talk to the states and make sure they're getting everything they need to get. But they drill down on these things and they look for the most negative version of it possible because their audience has really been psychologically conditioned to view things as negatively as possible all the time about this administration. And there's certainly cause for criticism for the Trump administration on a number of fronts, but it's never in good faith. It's never offered up as, well, they didn't do this well. Here's the context. We were told that Trump was a traitor and that he was basically a fascist who was destroying democracy for 3 years. These people are insane, and that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed despite everything else. So this is what we see happening. And then you got Joe Biden, who, remember, he was going to do a press conference every day, and then they realized that didn't work. That didn't look good. You're going to have, a shadow state with Joe Biden running it right now? We don't need to hear what Joe Biden thinks about different responses or what he would do if he were in charge. We got bigger things to think about, and he's not in charge. So why'd they back off those press conferences? Well, they got rid of them because it didn't look good for Joe Biden. And in part, it's because he doesn't offer anything valuable at this point in time. Play clip 9.
Let's set aside President Trump's rhetoric. Is there an action he has not taken that you would be taking right now if you were president?
Yeah, I'd be doing two things at least. One, I would make sure that he uses the Defense Production Act not only to deal with the issue of whether or not there are ventilators, but I would do the same thing for masks and gowns and masks and shields, all the things that our first responders and our doctors and nurses need. Why are we waiting? We know they're needed. They're going to be increasingly needed. You just heard the president's spokesperson talk about the increasing need.
A lot of Democrats really don't understand not just that government is full of slow, slothful, corrupt, inept people, which it is, unfortunately, but also the way that the private sector works and why you can get more things if you allow the expertise within the private sector to do what it does. Right? Here's the disconnect. When it comes to public sector stuff, it's always listen to the experts. It's always the CDC says this, the NIH says that, and sometimes that is certainly the appropriate response. But they defer to the experts there. But they won't defer to experts within the private sector when it comes to making stuff. You know who's really good at making things? People who make them. You know who's not as good at them? People that just say, make a million masks appear because we say so. This is what you see this in socialist command control economies. You see this in places where the state is in charge in this way at this level, where they just will, this is what the Soviet Union would do. They would say, okay, we want there to be X amount of loaves of bread, so that's what the bread makers have to make. And guess what? That didn't take into account what the price of wheat was, what the price of labor was, and so there were all these shortages and problems. Democrats who are claiming the president should just direct the private industry to make all this stuff don't understand that he's telling some private industry, hey, can you guys make this? We'll pay you. And then leaving it to them to make because they'll be better at it. And then if someone slows down too much or they're haggling too much in the negotiation, he invokes the Defense Production Act and we go from there. So that's where this is right now. I mean, Joe Biden coming forward and acting like he would just make some declaration about how there need to be 50 million masks or whatever. Who knows? I don't even know what the number is right now. They think they need nationally, but it's an enormous number of these surgical masks. Who knows what that would mean? It wouldn't. I don't think it would help for Joe Biden to just make this declaration. But I mean, a big problem here is that they're trashing Trump so much in the response for obvious political reasons. And then they turn around and they offer us up Joe Biden, who is really a confused, elderly, and honestly corrupt guy and uninspiring and has no real executive experience of any kind other than, you could talk about the executive experience his son got on the board of a company he never should have been on. Joe Biden is not someone that you would put on the board of any company to advise you, unless you were just looking for his name, which we know that's a thing that happens on the boards of companies too. So that's where we are right now. I mean, we're looking at this entire response and we're saying, well, hold on a second. We're supposed to think that Joe Biden would do such a better job or Nancy Pelosi would do such a better job. In truth, government at all levels has failed you. There have been failures. There have been missteps. There should have been more information out sooner to the public about really what this was and how dangerous it was going to be. I think I'm not convinced, for example, that the response that views this as a national level thing where everywhere you should have a lockdown instead of place by place, and the federalism that was being discussed, or a more federalist approach of states and localities making decisions. And then I think that in the end, we'll look back and think that probably would have been a better move. But here's what we're up against during all of this. No matter what happens to the economy and no matter what happens in the aftermath of this, and the aftermath now feels like it's very far away, you will have people who tell you that we saved 2 million lives and that there's nothing. So no destruction of the economy, no erosion of civil rights, no erosion of civil liberties, rather, no erosion of any part of our society. They will say can compare to the did they save 2 million lives? We'll end up seeing what the final number is here, but that will be the claim. So just be prepared for that as well. If you think that we head into a Great Depression and now all of a sudden there's shortages, there's not enough food, there's real problems like that, they'll turn around and say, when you want to be like, I told you guys we had to do more for the economy, they'll turn around and say to you, but no, we saved 2 million lives, so shut up. The government knew what it was. The government response here was the correct one. And it's viewed somehow as a partisan response, even though I think this is just everyone's trying to make the best decisions they can under the circumstances. And I certainly hope that the economy just comes roaring back, and maybe Mnuchin's right. And, the people right now who are in the prediction business have a very, very tough way ahead of them, because really those who are good at predicting things understand that what they do is pattern analysis, and they look for similar situations, how they played out, and then they try to gauge the percentages for how something's likely to play out in the future. And you can't really do that with this because we've never seen anything like this before. So that's my feeling on this, my friends. There's still a lot of information we need to make better decisions. But Joe Biden, here's just I wanted to give you a little bit of a moment away from the virus and everything. Here's Joe Biden giving one of his Bidenisms. Play 11.
What do you make of the fact that the president's job rating has bumped up during this crisis?
Well, I think that's a typical American response. In every single crisis we've had that I've been around, going back to Jimmy Carter and the hostages all the way through to this moment, presidents' ratings have always gone up in a crisis. But that old expression, the proof of is going to be in eating the pudding. What's it going to look like? I hope we're in a situation going into the fall where this is under control, where we've done all the right things and things are beginning to move, and the president is listening to the scientists, as I said, and stopping the personal attacks on people who disagree with him. And let's get away from the childishness of this and focus on the problem.
The proof is going to be in eating the pudding. I got to say, actually, Joe Biden's quote there, everything he said about we got to see where this is and let's stop the personal attacks and we'll have time. I think it was a very astute thing to say. So as much as I just wanted the proof is going to be in eating the pudding, I just like the way he said that one. But actually, his analysis there was pretty good, which is that people should stop with the nasty personal stuff and let's see where we are in dealing with this. I think that's a better approach for all of us. It would certainly be a better approach in the media, especially now that, okay, it's hit us. Now we're in the midst of this. Now we're in the fight. And we know that it's a big one and it's real and this is scary. So let's look to do the best we can under the circumstances and not do what Pelosi's doing, which is just the most disgraceful partisan finger pointing stuff. It's just bad news. It's bad news when Pelosi's able to do what she does. She does not help anybody except herself.
Everyone has been instructed that if they see worship services going on, they will go to the officials of that congregation. They'll inform them they need to stop the services and disperse. If that does not happen, they will take additional action up to the point of fines and potentially closing the building permanently.
Closing the place of worship permanently, the mayor of New York City says. I think everyone heard that and said, what? But this is what I mean by we have been conditioned to think that the threat of tyrannical overreach comes from this president. That's what the media has been telling you for years, even though every time he's had some policy dispute with the other side, it goes to court. He goes through the system. You have this bad faith #resistance judiciary that comes up with the most preposterous justifications for slowing down this president, and they have decisions that they go forward with that are just garbage, and then it has to make its way through the judiciary, and Trump eventually is right. But they've been telling us that Trump is a threat of tyranny for all this time, and now you have the mayor of New York City saying, yeah, if you have look, I don't think people in New York right now should be gathering in large numbers for any reason, and that includes religious services. There was a case in South Korea. They did a whole case study of a woman who had COVID-19, went to services there, and infected a whole lot of people in her church. So it can happen. It does happen. It's important not to do that. But to threaten to shut down a place of worship permanently, how is that helpful in this moment? And also, under what authority would the mayor of New York? I'm sure he'd come up with some authority, but that is disconcerting. It's also disconcerting that the same person who is now telling us all that, I'm not going to say all hope is lost, but he has not been, the mayor of New York has not been a calming presence. That's to say the least with all this stuff going on. Here is what he was saying before we saw quite how bad this whole thing was. Play 16.
Right now, we have 1,200 hospital beds. That is a very, very substantial capacity. The message to New Yorkers from the beginning has been, this is something we all can handle together. Go about your lives, go about your business. We have the capacity to keep this contained. I think we said the other day in the meeting that Health and Hospitals is in strong shape, something like ventilators. You can speak to that.
On ventilators, New York City is in good shape, and based on even the most dire predictions of percentages of people who will have serious illness with this, we will be fine.
I want to keep encouraging people to go out and live their lives and patronize those businesses.
One other question. Tomorrow evening, Purim begins.
Yes.
Is it safe for people who have no symptoms to visit parents and grandparents?
Yeah, the point is, and the commissioner can jump in. Yeah, if no one has symptoms, neither the visitors nor the people being visited, yes.
That was a lot of guidance, a lot of advice that the mayor was giving the people of New York City. How much of that looks in retrospect like it was even a little bit a good idea? None of it. You're going to have a lot of people that are playing the blame game and saying that people didn't respond to this properly. And it's going to be a political nastiness all across the board. I would just say that with de Blasio, he's taken a very firm hand with everybody here in the city today. And it's hard for all of us who see this situation not to feel a little bit of, well, weren't you telling us until recently that everything was going to be fine, and now you're telling us everything is the opposite of fine? And he has professional health people. All they do is look at this. He listened to the experts, we were told. And the experts were wrong on this one, too. A lot of people were wrong. Don't pay attention to the finger pointing right now. There's plenty of time for that later. Right now, we got to get through the storm.